Last week, we spoke at length on the topic communication. It was more or less a rush uh, lecture, although I'm sure you enjoyed it as many aspects of communication which you weren't privy to was tabled on that day. Today, before we go into our next topic, I wish to have a recap just so that we fully comprehended what was taught, what was explained last week. I started off by explaining communication as a human process. I told you that all living things communicate in one form or the other. But where a human being is concerned, language is used to communicate. Language is used to communicate. Animals do not have language. Animals rather utilize other means to signal their intents. For example, they use smell, they use noise, and they use signs. These are what animals use to get their messages across to other animals. So I now went into the acts, the traditional and conventional means of communication. When we look at the traditional, we just have to understand that there have been changes over time. So traditional encompasses, that is, it includes the historic. But if we have to look at the post-historic, that is, after the historic, there is another form, there is another variant of traditional. Historic was what we spoke about last week. It included communication like bush burning, like drums, like beating of guns, like positioning of twigs, leaves in the bush to pass messages. These were historic methods of communication those days, apart from the face-to-face medium of communication. The traditional, on the other hand, refers to that which many of us, especially you, those are dealing with now, you might not be private all of them. You may have heard about them, but not really utilize them. When I say utilize, it means use them. Because back then, there were so many forms, traditional forms of communication, which today people see as archaic. What is archaic? Old-fashioned. So those of you in present generation, I am not too sure that you are privy to those traditional forms of communication. What are these traditional forms of communication? We'll come to that place. And then there is the modern or conventional or contemporary means of communication. These are what technology, advancement in technology imposed on us. So, just so you have your notes, if you look at the board, I had already written distinguishing among historic, traditional, conventional, unconventional, that means conventional and conventional or contemporary means of communication. The historic, as said, this includes bush burning, beating of drums. Please take these things down. Beating of drums, positioning of leaves, roots, stems, etc. that can be adequately decoded, or interpreted. Then we have the post-historic, or what we call conventional communication. When you say anything is post, it implies after. After. When you say anything is pre, it implies before. So post-historic are those forms or mediums of communication which occurred in the historic period. These are also conventional communication. What are these forms of communication? They include face-to-face, telegram, fax, fax, you have others like print, postal services, letter writing, print media, have telegram, fax. What else do we have here? Letter writing, print media, postal services. I've spoken about face-to-face, telegram, fax. Okay, telephone calls. Now, if you look at this post-historical, conventional, traditional communication, you will understand, or you will be baffled to say, how come? This is because technology has changed a lot of things. Gone are the days when for you to transact a business, you have to be personally at a particular place. But these days, businesses are conducted without the physical presence of the other, of either the buyer or the seller. There are various mediums of communication that people utilize to conduct their businesses. Postal services, though they still exist, but how many people patronize them? This is because these days, with the likes of Telegram, with the likes of WhatsApp, who wants to use postal services again? But there are still other services provided by postal services. The same postal services are equipped to function as those who send telegrams on behalf, who send parcels. But at the end of the day, these things, do they actually get to the recipient when needed at the appropriate time? We don't know. What about telephone calls? I'm not talking about the mobile phones we have today. You know, all those phone calls that you will old-fashioned listening, like the one they used during World War II, that you look at one, brrr, two, brrr, and then you start to wait for whether there's network or no network. Those are, they are stagnant, they are old-fashioned. So basically, all these have paved way for what is today known as modern, conventional, or contemporary communication. That is modern, conventional, or contemporary means of communication. So, what are these contemporary or conventional means of communication? We all know them. You have emails, of course, you have, what do you call it? WhatsApp, you have the mobile phone, and then there's the internet. There's the internet, social medias, online means of communication. This gets to a wider community as compared to the limited community the traditional means gets to. I hope this is clear. So that is the communication, the traditional and the conventional form. Now, when the other time I told you that there are categories of communication. This includes the verbal, the written, and the non-verbal. I told you that the verbal is when you speak. I speak, you listen. That is the essence of it. I speak, you listen. That is for the verbal. Speech is a verb. For the written, I write, you read. I write, you read. And for the non-verbal, you observe a person because no speech is intended and no writing material is intended. You observe a person and you make inferences. Whatever inferences you have to make depends on what that person is trying to pass across without the use of words or any other material. It may be sign language. It may be sign language. Sign language, of course, you know sign language to mean those languages that does not involve words or writing. They are usually in terms of signs or what is called paralinguistic. 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 These are communication without the use of words or writing, but with the use of signs. Of course, every society have different paralinguistic features. I don't know if there's a Yoruba person among us here, but In Nigeria, here, if a Yoruba person opens the palm like this, it is an abuse. In foreign countries, if somebody says you give a finger like this, it passes a message. If somebody taps the head like this, it passes a message. If somebody taps the chest like this, it passes a message. If somebody places the head, side of the head on the palm like this, it passes a message which says sleeping or I want to sleep. I hope that is clear. I now gave you 3 definitions of language, of communication. I gave you 3 definitions. I told you one is any means by which a thought is transferred from one person to another. Any means by which a thought is transferred from one person to another. The second definition was that communication is a process by which information is shared through a channel to achieve a particular purpose. The process by which the information is shared through a channel to achieve a particular purpose. The third one is communication is a process by which information is passed between individuals and or organizations by means of previously agreed symbols. Previously agreed symbols. That means the medium or the channel. What is the information? That is the message. It says process by which information is passed between individuals and or organizations. I told you communication is carried out in a one-on-one, one-on-many, many-to-one. In the case, as I'm talking to you now, communication is now a one-on-many because I am dealing with multiple students. If it is a one-on-one, maybe it is you and your mother, me and my son, me and my friend. If it is a many-to-one, it's like an interview or a panel. You face a panel made up of different individuals and you interact. I hope that is clear. We now spoke about the process of communication. The process of communication. Communication follows a chronological order. If you break that structure, then there will be a gap, a vacuum. In essence, what are the process of communication? Communication must start for a reason. This reason is what is called the impulse or the stimuli. The stimuli, this is what triggers the information. So number one, there is the stimuli. I had this thing on the board last week. Number two, the stimulus, sorry. Number two is the sender. That is where the message is emanating from. If I have to call, okay, Victor, please get me that book on the shelf. I am the sender. I have called Victor, who is what? The recipient or the receiver. How did I call Victor? Okay, maybe it was face-to-face, maybe it was through the use of the phone. That is the channel. So all in all, the process of communication passes through a particular order. The stimulus, which triggers the information, the sender, who is also known as the encoder, the message, that is what the sender is trying to pass across or has passed across, the channel, that is how did the sender pass this message across? Through phone, through a letter, through face-to-face, through what do you call it? Public address system, whatever. That is the channel. the medium which the message was passed across. Then you have the receiver, also known as the decoder. Don't forget, the message is the code. The sender is the encoder. He encodes the code. And the receiver is the decoder. He decodes the message. What do you mean by decode? It means to give appropriate interpretation to the message. Finally, there is what is called the feedback. The feedback is the response by the receiver to the code sent by the encoder or the sender. There's one important thing you need to know about communication. If I say something and you hear, you receive, it does not mean that communication has taken place. I may use a language which you do not understand, but definitely you heard. But because you do not understand the language, then what happens? Your response to that language may be zero, because you do not understand that language. So the feedback is a way to say, okay, the sender sent a message to Victor, go and get me the book. Victor actually, the book on the shelf, Victor actually went to the shelf and brought it. That shows that message, the code was properly interpreted. But in a situation whereby I speak Yoruba, I don't know if any of you understand Yoruba, but if you don't understand Yoruba, I said, oh, Loma around Jewa, which in English means go and buy food for me. But because you do not understand what I've said, how are you going to respond to that message? It means that your feedback will be virtually nil. In essence, since you do not understand, you cannot give an appropriate interpretation to my message. I hope that is clear. Now, to round up on, or let us say, on communication, we should understand one fundamental thing about communication. What do we use communication for? What do we use communication for? We do not communicate just for the purpose of communicating. We use communication for specific purposes. Is it entertainment? Is it entertainment? Is it to pass or to disseminate messages and information? If, as it is now, I am disseminating information to you, I am teaching, I am lecturing. So that is an aspect of communication. If you see a program on the telly, DSTV, GoTV, so whatever, and you laugh. Maybe those of you who are obsessed with cartoons, Tom and Jerry. Personally, I enjoy watching Tom and Jerry. I've always liked that program. Tom and that mouse, I don't know where the two of them met, but one will eventually kill the other. So you can understand the laughter generated when they watch and Jerry. So that is a form of entertainment, which in essence is a function of communication. Another function of communication is to transmit social heritage. What do you mean by social heritage? It means your culture. Your culture. Many of us were born in the city. I was born in Lagos, but ended up being shipped down to my state in Delta, where I learned a lot of things about my culture. I'm not a Yoruba person. but usually I learned a lot about Yoruba culture because I was born in Yoruba community. So communication is used to to transfer social heritages, customs, norms. When you say customs, when you say culture, it means the way of life of a particular society or group of people. Social heritage, norms, that's his behavior, culture. These are the ways of life of a particular society or a group of society. For example, we know for sure that in Yoruba a son or a daughter usually prostrates. The son prostrates, the daughter kneels before an elder as a form of respect. Although this varies from what obtains in Africa compared to what obtains in advanced climes, because in a place like the United Kingdom or the US, nobody prostrates, nobody kneels. What do? They shake hands, they hug. But here in this part of the world, we kneel down, or we are expected to kneel down or to prostrate if it's in Yoruba. I don't know about your culture, but I'm very sure you have an idea of things your people do, things your people eat, where they get the dress, and so on and so forth. Finally, communication is used to interact with our loved ones, with our friends, with other people. Interact, that is another function. When you say interaction, you need to mix with other people. You go to school, you interact with your classmates, with your classmates. That is interaction. Interaction doesn't necessarily imply physical presence. I am interacting with you now. Doesn't mean I am right in front of you. Please take note of that. Please take note of that. Now, let us continue. I hope this is clear. If there's any question, please ask. If there's any question, please ask. Now, there is an aspect we need to understand because many of us are not conscious of it. What do we use in communicating as rational human beings? We use what is called language, or what is finally called lingua franca. You want to ask a question? Hello? Okay, let's continue. What do we understand by the word language or lingua franca? If you remember that in one of the definitions I gave to you, I said by previously agreed symbols. Language is a medium of expression. We use language to express our thoughts, our feelings, our minds to different people. Over time, you'll find out that there are different languages in the world today. Different language. In Nigeria alone, we have over 320 languages. from different communities. In this southern part of Nigeria alone, even in the so-called Yoruba, there are variants of the language. This makes it to differ from the other. Even the English language varies. That is why you have British English and you have the American English. When you talk about lingua franca, you are talking about the widely accepted language which acts as a bridge between the one and the other. Widely accepted. It means that it is generally accepted. English language is one of the most accepted languages in the world. Others include Italian, you have French, you have Spanish. Of course, there are other, this is like, what do you call it, the Greek, what do you call it, the Dutch languages. All these languages are limited, not totally limited to what we refer to as native speakers. Who are these native speakers? Native speakers are those who are fluent, adepts in the use or in the in speaking, in writing and reading. Speaking, writing, reading, and eventually comprehending the agreed symbols of any of these languages. Let us focus on English language as a lingua franca. How did English language get to Nigeria? Because we were colonized by the British. That is why we are part of what we call the Commonwealth. We were colonized by the British. A country like Togo, a country like Republic of Benin, were colonized by the French. That is why today their mannerisms, their language is basically French. Even in English language, there are variants. Like I said, you have the American English and you have the British English. The British English, also known as RP or received pronunciation. Please note, I did not say pronunciation. This is wrong. There is no word like pronunciation. There is pronounce, but no pronunciation. Please take note. It is called pronunciation. It is called pronunciation. So the RP, or what we call the Queen's English, this is what we use in Nigeria today. Unfortunately, over time, we have basically ended up making series of mistakes in our relations with people and how we use these words, especially in this part of the world. Let's say Nigeria. There is what we call Nigeria English. Nigeria Englishes. Yes, some of you will be surprised that what is the meaning of Englishes? There is Englishes. So also as the plural of money is monies. Don't be surprised. One thing about language, especially English language, is that it is dynamic. It changes with time. So Nigerian Englishes, has it been approved? Is it recognized? Of course, it is recognized. We are not going into Nigerian Englishes as a topic. I just want you to understand certain basics about communication. Nigerian Englishes are approved for the mere fact that they communicate, or it communicates. What do we mean by it communicates? It means that it is understood, it is accepted. But these Englishes, these Nigerian Englishes, they are not conventional. That is, they do not apply to what I previously referred to as ROP or Queen's English. They do not apply to this. If we have to look at why do we have Nigerian Englishes, then we now have to come back to what we refer to as language acquisition. Language acquisition. What do we mean by language acquisition? Acquisition simply implies acquire, to get. How do we get these languages? First, you have to understand these symbols. When you see a symbol like this, a symbol like this, a symbol like this means language, language one. This means language two. This means language three. What is language one? Language one is your mother tongue. Your mother tongue. When you say mother tongue, it means the language you were born into. If you were born in Oyo State, you were born in Ogun State, what is your mother tongue? It's bound to be Yoruba. That is your first language. You were born into it. It is innate. When something is innate, it means it is internal. It means it is internal. It is different from L2 and L3. That is your language, your second language, and your third language. Your second language is learned. You learn this language. How do you learn this language? Because you moved from one place to another. You were born in Yoruba land. Somewhere along the line, maybe your family now relocated to the east, to Imo State. As you grew up, the medium of communication there was the Igbo language. You have no choice but to acquire that language. You have no choice but to acquire that language just so that you may be able to interact freely with the people within that community. The same applies to L3. It means that you also acquire a third language. You also acquire a third language. Finally, I want to point out, also, if you remember, I said the lingua franca is the language which is generally accepted. In the case of Nigeria, the lingua franca is English. Is English. In the case of what do you call it? Togo, Republic of Benin, Senegal, it is French. Now, what do you call somebody who is proficient? When you use the word proficient, what does it mean? It is ability to be good at something. So if you are proficient, in one language, if you are proficient in one language, then you are set just your ability to speak just one language, your ability to speak, read, write, and understand a language. You are said to be monolingual. Please take note of it. You are said to be monolingual. That is one. But if you have the potentials, the ability to speak, read, write, and understand two languages, you are said to be bilingual. Bi means two. Mono, anything mono implies one. Please take note. Mono means one. So monolingual means ability to understand, speak, read, and write a language as a native speaker. As a native speaker, if you say native, you understand what that means. In many instances, you find out that somebody born into a particular language community will definitely be referred to as a native speaker because the person would have absorbed the vowels, the consonants of that particular language. It may be slightly different from somebody who acquired. That is why if you look at it, a Nigerian who travels to the US within a short time starts to speak like the Americans. But there is still bound to be a fundamental difference. I hope that is clear. Bilingual means that the individual is capable, he has the potential to speak, to read, to write, and understand two major languages like a native speaker. For example, if you can speak English and the Igbo language, you are bilingual. If you can speak English and Yoruba, you are bilingual. If you can speak them as a native speaker, you are bilingual, which means that you have learned the vowels, the consonants of these languages. Lastly, there is multilingualism. What is multilingualism? Remember, mono, one, bi, two. Multi is coined from the word multiple, which means many. It means that you are capable of speaking proficiently 3 or more languages. It may be difficult, but an individual who speaks 3 or more languages may have decided that he or she has the talent, may have traveled to these places, may have seen the potentials in acquiring. Remember what I said about language 2, language 3. You acquire, you learn these languages. So when you learn these languages, it is not the same thing as your mother tongue. That is your innate language or the language in which you were born into. I hope that is clear. So our time is spent. But before we go, is there any question anyone wish to ask? Please, any question? I have those I have on board here in my class. Success Chinwedu Alban, Sarah Blessing Omucheka, Emmanuel Adasa Gideon, Elijah Blessing, Emmanuel Adasa, Elijah Blessing, they are online. Christabel Chizi Egwenu Basil is not online. Victor Biswa Baride is not online. Okay, Victor is online. Thank God, Boyle Okuda, Sarah Manfred, Obanle Owo Jason Adebayo, Echionu, Emmanuela Manuchinto, Enchiogu, Great Man, Chikenu, Adewumi, Cynthia, Adebola, Mwigwe, Samuel, and thank God. Thank God. Okay, that is, I've called the name before. So, if there is any question, please ask, or you may wish to ruminate on the lecture today and get across to me if you run into any hitch. If you run into any hitch, please get across to me. By next week, we are going to veer into another topic. Our next topic is organs of speech. Organs of speech. It means that in the human body, what are those parts of the human body which we use, which we employ, which we utilize to generate speech? Please take note of what I just said. Those parts of the human body, especially the head down to the neck, which we use, which we employ, which we utilize to generate speech or words. Don't forget that from the head down, these organs of speech, they have what is called primary functions and secondary functions. So next week, we'll start off with these organs of speech, starting with the primary function, secondary function. We are not going to go deeply into transcription, because that alone, under what we call phonology, is another course on its own. So just so that we meet the primary targets, our course outline for this semester, we'll just go into the basics of speech production, the organs involved, and the primary sounds that emanates from the connection of these various organs. So that will be that for today. So my dear students, if there is any question you wish to ask, please go ahead. Cynthia.
Sarah.
Emmanuel.
Sarah. Manfred, Sarah.
What?
Manfred, Sarah. I have a question.
Okay, I'm listening.
You talked about the Americans using Arupi and the Queen's English. I don't understand that particular area.
The Americans using what?
And in the type of, you talked about Arupi.
Yes.
And also the Queen's English. I don't get that area.
you say ROP, it means British English. I told you that Britain colonized Nigeria. Remember, so we are presently supposed to be using British English or ROP. But because of the way we interact, there has been modifications to our language. I cannot state specifically, but then there is the fact that our society have evolved. So we tend to use words to communicate. That is the origin of Nigerian English. If you remember, I said Nigerian Englishes, they communicate, but they are not an organ of British English. So officially, we are supposed to use the RP, the Queen's English or British English. We are even doing that because what I'm speaking now is RP. It is British English. I have not used any form of Nigerian English. So the basic difference between Nigerian English and British English is that officially we use British English. Unofficially, we use Nigerian English. Is that clear enough? Hello, Emmanuel. Hello, Emmanuel.
Yes, sir.
Is that clear enough? Officially, we use British English.
Sarah.
We use British English officially. British English is the same as RP or Queen's English. So presently using RP because the English I'm speaking to you is formal. The minute I interject with that English, then it becomes informal. For example, we know there is one English called Japa. Now, I think many of us know the meaning of Japa. So if a Nigerian tells you that I want to Japa, what does that mean? It means that I want to travel out of the country. So if you look at it fundamentally, Japa is not an English word. It was just coined from a language, and it means to leave the country. So you see now how Nigerian English is. The word buka is where people eat. That word has even been integrated into the dictionary today. Okada, everybody knows the meaning of Okada, motorcycle. These are examples of Nigerian English. They are not British, Queen's, or RP Englishes. They are Nigerian English. In other words, Japa, Buka, Okada are not permitted in RP. They are not permitted in British English, but they are permitted in Nigerian English. I hope that is clear enough. Elijah, blessing. Do you wish to ask many questions?
No, sir.
Yes? No question. Cynthia. Cynthia, are you with us? What about
Sir.
Jason? Okay, Cynthia, I'm listening. Do you have any question?
No, sir.
Okay. So I take it that everything said last week today basically understood.
Yes, sir.
Please go through go through all discussed here today. If there's any question, you now have a way of getting across to me. Please. So with that, we'll call it a day. See you or talk to you next week. Bye.